Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning, Stephen.
Malcolm Turnbull presumably has a busy weekend ahead of him. Apart from finally moving officers, he has a cabinet reshuffle to finalise, one which rejuvenates the government without inflaming tensions too much. What do you think are the main changes that he'll make?
Obviously there'll be very extensive changes and many of them we don't have any idea about, but we do know that Scott Morrison is expected to be the new Treasurer, and this is the culmination of a rise and rise for Scott Morrison over the last year or so, and obviously the decline of Joe Hockey. It'll be interesting to see what happens to Joe Hockey, because he has been performing actually very solidly all week, much better than he performed before all this. And he obviously wants to stay in the ministry. He had the choice, of course, of having a hissy fit going to the back bench, but he's decided that it's better to stay in the tent. There's been speculation that he could get communications or even defence. I think he'd be quite good in defence, but I stress we don't know. The interesting question will be where Christopher Pyne goes. He's been making noises about liking the idea of defence. I think that would be a big conflict of interest, given he's a South Australian with a seat that's been under huge pressure, and of course the subs being built or not built in South Australia is a big question for the next few months.
Well, those are the people changes, perhaps the big people changes. And what about policy changes? Turnbull has said that he'll keep the existing position on same-sex marriage and climate change. If he changes nothing, he's open to a Labour attack that all they've done is move to a smoother performer. If he changes too much, he may antagonise those whom he needs to keep in check.
I think that we will obviously see a tweaking of existing policies, in some cases maybe a change of existing policies over the next few months. But remember that a number of policies are still up in the air anyway. So he's got a clean slate on things, for example, like tax reform. There's that review that's going on, there's a green paper to come, there's a white paper to come. There are all sorts of choices for the government to make, and it would have been making those choices whether it was the Abbott government or now, of course, a new Turnbull government. So I think that in that area it'll be very interesting to see how bold Malcolm Turnbull is willing to be. There's industrial relations, and more immediately, of course, there's higher education, where the legislation has been defeated and there'd been intentions to bring it back. Will that be altered? There's the legislation to make it harder for conservation groups to challenge in the courts development projects. That's very controversial. Facing trouble in the Senate. Will Malcolm Turnbull take a backward step on that? So there's a lot of areas that are open or semi-open.
Inevitably there are disgruntled Liberal MPs. After all, 30 of them voted for Kevin Andrews as deputy leader, which was never going to happen. Is there any possibility of a breakaway party, the equivalent of the Tea Party, perhaps a Barbie party?
I don't think so. I think that you're right that certainly a number of MPs are unhappy, and the big question is whether they settle or whether they create trouble for Malcolm Turnbull over the longer term. That will depend partly on what he does and how popular he is in the electorate and so on. But if you'd been looking for a breakaway party, you'd be looking for someone like Cory Bernardi to be making noises in that direction. I think he's going to be a strong voice within the coalition parties.
Turning to Labour, early polls suggest the coalition has already caught up. They should win the Canning by-election easily now. What will Bill Shorten's busy weekend involve, do you think?
Well, it should involve a good deal of thinking, frankly. He will need to give more attention to his own performance and how he can improve that. Always easier said than done, of course, for a leader, but nevertheless he'll have to sharpen up. I think personally he should take advantage of the Turnbull reshuffle to have a reshuffle of his own. Not saying he will, but he does actually have a couple of people coming into the shadow ministry, because a couple who are not contesting the election are going out. If he were wise, he would use that and the Turnbull reshuffle to say, well, now's the time to freshen up the team, to get stronger people in some key areas, including education and health.
And of course, he's got Senator Katie Gallagher there now, former ACT Chief Minister and a Health Minister for many years.
And she will be coming in, the expectation is, to the shadow ministry in some capacity. But given all her experience, it's foolish not to really put her on the escalator, because he needs strong voices.
Well, Michelle, never a dull moment. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Stephen.